Welcome in, folks, here on Hack City. We're getting ready and waiting for this LSU Florida State game to kick off at 4:30 Pacific time, 7:30 Eastern time. Figured this could be a really good timing to talk about the games that unfolded, all the storylines, all the thoughts that have been circulating from the main games that were played during that Saturday slate of games. I already did my reaction to the Thursday slate, and if you missed that, be sure to go check that out. Talked a lot about that Pitt West Virginia game. Talked a little bit about the implications from the Purdue Penn State game as well. But the real important matchups that we needed to see to get a better understanding of the landscape of college football, to get some initial thoughts and to get the ball rolling on how this season could play out, all came yesterday. We're going to talk about Ohio State versus Notre Dame. We're going to talk about Anthony Richardson's performance against Utah. We're going to talk about Georgia-Oregon, which was a bloodbath. We're also going to touch on the aftermath of me claiming that Cincinnati was going to get blasted by Arkansas, and it was still a close game. Thank you, Colin, for pointing out my mini. I still don't know what L's you're referring to. Is it just the Notre Dame loss? I'm still trying to figure that out. And Colin, without missing a step, is the first person in live stream, which I appreciate that, Colin. And the last thing that we're going to talk about, we have to address the overranked nature of where NC State is currently in the way that they played against East Carolina. So that's all that is coming up on today's live stream. It's probably going to go right up until kickoff, maybe a little bit into kickoff of that first game. The first thing that I want to address, and as somebody who does NFL draft evaluations and somebody who watched tape for all of the quarterbacks in this class, I made a point not to watch Florida quarterback Anthony Richardson. I made a point not to watch him because he did not play enough last year to put together a proper evaluation for this year's upcoming class. And I got to say, yesterday's game was enough for me to, one, regret not watching him, but two, I've already made a pretty firm determination of what kind of a guy that is. He is a really damn good quarterback, and he is on a trajectory to be a first-round pick. If he plays like that in more than half of his games this season, he is going to be a first-round pick. That should not be a hot take. And if he continues to play like that, he could even potentially be a Heisman finalist. Like, that is not an outlandish statement to make. Anthony Richardson is far and away one of the most talented, physically gifted quarterbacks in college football. We kind of knew that he had the traits, but the big question mark from a lot of evaluators was, can he put it together to play at a high level? It's a lot of traits. Can he be put into a situation where he can bring everything out onto the field to put Florida in positions to win games? That Utah defense is really talented. It is really good, led by Clark Phillips. There are a lot of really good players, and it's a well-coached unit. For him to put up the stat line that he did yesterday, and for him to finish with the crazy plays, the one he had in the red zone where he redirected, broke a tackle, he had that really long rush early on in the game that I tweeted out. For him to put those plays on tape against that defense shows the quality of athlete, the quality of player that Anthony Richardson is. The one thing, though, that needs to be acknowledged is that Florida roster it's okay. For an SEC team and for the schedule that they're going to play, it was good enough to beat Utah with a dominant performance from Anthony Richardson. But it's not going to be good enough. And again, that Utah team is good, but it's not going to be good enough for them to get wins over if they had to match up with Georgia next week or Alabama next week. It's not that good of a roster. Anthony Richardson's good enough to win them ball games, but they still need time to get where they could potentially be in a year or so under Billy Napier. I do have to give credit, though, to Billy Napier in preparing his guys for this level of an important game in week one. I was on the Believe SEC tailgate show with Blake Ruffino, and we even had a Florida pundit on who didn't have high expectations for that game for Florida. He thought, and I agreed with him, and I said this, and I agreed with him in the sense that It is an uphill battle to beat Utah in week 1. It is a very disadvantageous matchup as you're trying to figure out the identity of your team. But the identity has been determined, which is give Anthony Richardson the ball, let him make plays, run the football, and you're going to win football games. But you need to be consistent, and you need to be almost perfect when you have to play those top SEC programs like Alabama and like Georgia. Colin, you're saying hot take, Anthony Richardson will not be successful at the next level. Colin, I got to ask, what's the reasoning, though? What's the reasoning for why he is not going to be a successful pro? Because at 6'4", 240 pounds, the ability to redirect and move, and he's probably going to be a 4'4" athlete at that size. For him to do the things that he did in that game shows me he can be a successful pro. If a guy like Josh Allen could be successful and do the things that he does for Buffalo, there's no reason that Anthony Richardson can't be that type of a prospect. I honestly, the way that Anthony Richardson played was the way that is the way that Will Levis should be playing and did not play yesterday. Will Levis is supposed to be the big, crazy athlete with the big arm. And Anthony Richardson is already on the stock up after the way that he played in this game. I want to see what this Florida team can do. I have high hopes after this game. I'm not too down on Utah. It is going to hurt Utah's chances of making the college football playoff. They might even be out of it based on how the rest of the things shape out. If Florida finishes with a good record and they have that as their one loss on the record and they beat USC, they can make that argument to still be in contention for that last fourth college football playoff spot. I have to admit, though, Utah was my fourth seed coming into the season, who I thought could be the fourth seed for the college football playoff. And now that is going to be an uphill battle for them. They're going to need to finish perfectly. They're going to need Florida to finish with a really good record, and they're going to probably need some assistance from the teams ahead of them, teams like Ohio State, Michigan, who is going to be competing for those spots. Colin saying Will Levis ain't going to be successful at the next level either. It sounds like you're just hating on the traitsy quarterbacks that need some time to develop. USC's not taking the fourth spot, Colin. They're not taking the fourth spot. What quarterback do you like is what I'm curious to hear. Speaking of quarterbacks, though, and I'm sure that maybe you're positive on CJ Stroud. This game had a lot of attention for me on social media. You know, I got a lot of people who are trying to get a rise out of me because of the way that Notre Dame played before the game, trying to set me up to be worked up over the potential outcome of this Notre Dame Ohio State game. My main takeaway from the way that Notre Dame played against Ohio State is that everyone who knocked Notre Dame coming into this game, and I tweeted this out, everyone who knocked Notre Dame coming into this game and acted like Ohio State was going to cover that 17-point spread, it was proven wrong yesterday. They are a really good defensive team, a really freaking good defensive team, and they proved it. Ohio State, you even saw the damn sign that was at College Game Day, Catholics versus draft picks. We forget that Notre Dame has a lot of blue chip guys on that defense, and they showed up and showed out in that game. The offensive production for Ohio State was way less than I think everyone anticipated. It was way, way lower. Everyone thought that Stroud was going to come out and blast that Notre Dame secondary. And instead, he throws, I think it was the final stat line for him was 22 for 34 passing. He threw under. It was 24 for 34 passing, 223 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Travion Henderson goes under 100 yards rushing, no rushing touchdowns for him. That defensive performance from Notre Dame is going to help them win football games. But there is a concerning outlook for Notre Dame's offense. Tyler Buchner, I also have to give him credit. I was a little nervous but optimistic of what he could do in this game. he made some really nice throws. Like, I didn't think he was forcing the ball. I didn't think that he was off point with where he was placing the football. It felt, though, that Tommy Rees was reluctant to allow him to throw more. He didn't have that many passing attempts. We even got the play that I tweeted about where it was 3rd and long, and they called what was everybody in the stadium knew was going to be a draw play from Buckner, and he got stopped at the line of scrimmage. I think that was in the early on in the 4th quarter. They can't be calling plays like that down the line against USC and against Clemson this year. They just can't. They're not going to win football games playing scared, and that's how they looked. A big reason why, and I think part of it is Buckner and the lack of experience and the understanding that he is a good athlete. They were willing to lean on the run game. But at a certain point, when the run game is not working for Notre Dame, you can't keep forcing trying to run the ball. If it's not working and they're loading the box and they're prepared for a rushing play, you need to try and throw the ball. If it's not working, you just need to try and do it. If on 2nd and long, you're running the ball for no gain throughout the majority of the game and you're not picking up first downs, you're not picking up chunk yardage like you were doing earlier on, what is the benefit of continuously running the same types of plays and sticking to rushing plays when they are not going to work? At some point, Tommy Rees needs to open up the offense, and it felt like there were training wheels on the offense. The main issue that is going to hurt Notre Dame is if that receiving core, which is very thin, they lost Avery Davis. There is some serious limitations on any speed, any deep threats. There are no explosive names in that receiving group, which is very, very problematic. That is going to hurt Notre Dame throughout this season. I think that there is a ceiling for them to finish with 2 to 3 losses based on how they played because of how freaking good they are defensively. But there needs to be changes and improvements with the play calling. Tyler Buckner needs to step up more as a passer. There needs to be clear progression and improvement for the offense from what we saw in this first game. But it's still positive. Like, I point to how Michigan last year was really good defensively. A really freaking good defensive team with 2 really good running backs, which Notre Dame has Chris Tyree and Audric Estime, and a decent quarterback. They had Cade McNamara. They were also working in J.J. McCarthy. Limited receiving options and a strong offensive line, which is what Notre Dame has. And they were good enough to reach the college football playoff with that roster because they were reliant on their defense. And again, Notre Dame is going to win important football games at the end of the season because of how good they are defensively. But something, again, needs to be figured out with that passing game, because if they play like that, they can't get over 200 yards passing against a decent Ohio State defense, not a world beater defense, a decent Ohio State defense. They're going to continue to run into problems when they play USC and when they play Clemson. Colin, you're saying not a fan of Stroud either. Other than Alex Smith, I would say the majority of Urban Meyer, Ryan Day quarterbacks aren't successful at the next level. I mean, I have high expectations for Justin Fields. I don't want to go down the NFL rabbit hole. I think that we could get a really good career out of Justin Fields, assuming that Chicago doesn't completely mishandle him. Stroud's is a better prospect, though, than Justin Fields was. That shouldn't be a hot take. He is a more complete and developed passer coming out this season than Justin Fields was. To wrap up the Ohio State Notre Dame game, though, as somebody who is very high on CJ Stroud as a draft evaluator, if you haven't watched the breakdown show that I did with Ryan early on in the summer, where Ryan and I evaluated him and Bryce Young, I spoke very highly on CJ Stroud and on his potential as an NFL draft prospect. He's got the arm, he's got the size, he's got the movement capability, he's got the awareness. But what I was worried about is what popped up in this game is his inability to make decisions past his first read. And there were a couple scary throws that he made into tight coverage. And again, Notre Dame's defense had some really swarming, fantastic coverage. His pocket awareness was also not great. There were a number of instances. There were plays where he rolled out and he made some nice plays thrown on the run where I was at the bar and I was screaming. I was so damn mad that he was able to make some of those really tight window throws on the sideline. Like, those are the things that's going to make CJ Stroud a top 3 pick and likely the first quarterback in the class. But the plays where he is forcing the ball into double coverage because he can't compute past the second read, those things need to be fixed for me to be willing to fully buy in on him as a prospect. I'm bought in, and he is going to be one of the 2 top quarterbacks in this class. But this game, I felt like he took a slight step back. I feel like I didn't get that same level of CJ Stroud that we saw last year. It didn't seem like that same guy. I want to get to Georgia versus Oregon. And again, anyone who's hopping in, feel free to drop a comment. Colin's been, as always, the very vocal participant in the chat with dropping in his thoughts. And any thoughts on the games yesterday, would love to react to them. I think we might be joined later by Sean Anderson. He might come in and talk a little bit, but he's at the grocery store. Apparently that's a little more important. Georgia versus Oregon, though, I said this, and I don't think I need to take a victory lap, but I'm not taking a victory lap. I said that Georgia was going to smack Oregon. That was going to be a very lopsided game for Dan Lanning's debut at Oregon. A horrible situation to walk into if you're Dan Lanning, facing the team that you're coming from that is covered in NFL draft picks defensively and also dominant elite athletes in their receiving core. And then also frickin' Stetson Bennett, who's just the odd, goofy, unathletic guy that fits into this. Georgia is far and away should be the number 1 ranked team in the country. They whooped Oregon. Absolutely whooped Oregon. Oregon is supposed to be a quality program, and they were ranked in the top 15 on the notion that they were a good quality program. There was high expectations for Bo Nix, who sucks, and there was high expectations for Noah Sewell and Justin Flo, who I didn't think played very well in this game. And I am not high on Noah Sewell as a prospect and as a player, and they both look lost. Oregon did not look competent in this game. But more importantly, Georgia proved to us that they currently deserve to be ranked as the number 1 team in the country. They are that freaking good. They were all over the place swarming on defense. There was no time for Bo Nix to make any decisions in the pocket. And then when we know that Bo Nix is flustered, he forces passes, he runs in circles. We saw plenty of that. Plenty of Bo Nix doing that. But not to mention, man, the huge chunk plays that they were able to produce from their tight ends, from their running backs. That was the expectation for this season for Georgia, is that their tight end room, which has 3 really good players with Brock Bowers, Eric Gilbert, and Darnell Washington, multiple really good running backs. That was how they were going to produce after they lost George Pickens. That was how their production was going to come from. And can always be a little bit of reluctance to buy into a team that produces based on they can't get production out of their receivers. I just talked about the issues with Notre Dame, who couldn't get the production out of their receivers and how it held them back. But those position groups are so freaking good for Georgia that they are going to be dominant based on relying on those guys. Got a comment from DJ. Thank you, Joe. Georgia looks amazing. Jalen Carter could be first overall. Spencer Petras sucks. Iowa defense is elite. Torrey Taylor, Iowa punter, is NFL material. Spencer Petras, quickly just want to hit on that. Yes, he's terrible, and I kept tweeting this. Spencer Petras is horrible, and that was one of the most disgusting games that I've ever watched. Props to South Dakota State as a former FCS player, and I got to go see a South Dakota State game last year. That South Dakota State defense was fantastic, but you hit the nail on the head. There are so many talented defensive players on that Georgia roster with Keely Ringo and Nolan Smith. But, man, the big dog Jalen Carter came to frickin' play, and it looked like he wasn't even trying. There's that one play where it's not even a shed. There was an interior offensive lineman that very poorly attempted to block Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter literally threw him. This is a grown man that he threw, and that is the big trait for Jalen Carter, is the brute strength and the ability to know how to use it to position himself in successful spots to make plays. Threw a guy, makes a tackle for a loss. That is how freaking good Jalen Carter is, and I think that's the perfect summation of how talented and dominant this Georgia roster is from front to back. They deserve to be the number one team in the country. I'm not saying that Alabama is not that good. They played Utah State week 1. When they play somebody good on their schedule, which I think it's they play Texas next, which I'm not sure if I'm really going to count that as a determining game for when Alabama is good. When they play a game like this, where front to back, every unit on the field dominates their opponent's unit, and it's supposed to be a good football program, then we can start to have this debate. But as of right now, after week 1, Georgia is the best team in the country. I got to give some props to Stetson Bennett, who forever will be a meme as one of the goofiest quarterbacks to play college football, but yet to still win a national championship. He is undersized, has no arm talent, not a great athlete, but my man was playing out of his mind yesterday. If you can get that out of Stetson Bennett every single week, you're winning another national championship game. He was playing a way that I have never seen that man play. It's like he had athleticism injected into his body. And I'm not saying there's like a huge step up in who he is as a player. There's nothing significant. But Stetson Bennett, man, played really, really well. And it helps when everything else is clicking. The run game's clicking. You've got options. But the way that he was able to elude pressure and the way that he was completing a lot of his passes in the red zone, if he can do that consistently and we don't get bad Stetson Bennett, the very shaky Stetson Bennett, which popped up at times last year, if we get good Stetson every single week, they're going to win another national championship game. They are very capable of doing that with Stetson Bennett at quarterback because they did it last year. Final thought on this game. Bo Nix. We're done. It's over. We're done. And I tweeted this and I had an exchange with a couple different people. It didn't take long to finally make the determination for the public that Bo Nix is not the guy that everyone makes him out to be. He is not good. He is not a good quarterback. He's not an NFL draft prospect. He's not a good Pac-12 quarterback. He was never a good SEC quarterback. He is not a good quarterback. And the message that I had from some SEC fans, they were saying, well, we all knew this when he was at Auburn. Outsiders didn't, though. Non-SEC fans that were observers outside of observers of Auburn and highlights of Bo Nix, without fully digesting full games from Bo Nix, we're willing to say, like, this guy's a great athlete. Look at him make the hard plays look easy. Look at him do that. I even saw some idiot tweet that out who's a draft pundit tweet out, Bo Nix is known for making the hard plays look easy and the easy plays look hard. He just makes everything look hard. He's not a good quarterback. Pause, by the way. He's not a good quarterback. He's never been. He's in a new setting. He goes from Auburn. He's just bad in green. That is what Bo Nix is. He is now bad in green and neon yellow. He's never been good. So let's stop acting like that. I'm blanking on the name of Oregon's backup quarterback, but I was really high on him. He was a 5-star recruit. This is going to bug the hell out of me. I'm going to look it up after. I don't want to get distracted now. They need to start him. He was a 5-star recruit. He's very underrated. Dan Lanning got caught up in the SEC, bias of getting to watch and face Bo Nix. Needs to bench Bo. We're done. Move on. Start the young guy. Move on from the process and start building up the offensive chemistry with the new young quarter. This is going to bug the hell out of me. I got to look this up right now. But you need to start moving in the direction of youth and development. This Oregon team is more gutted than I think people are willing to acknowledge and were willing to acknowledge. Dan Lanning is a great coach. And I had high expectations for Dan Lanning coming into this season and for the direction of the program. I think he was the right guy for them to hire. But in order for them to reach the potential that they have, it is going to take them a couple of years. They lost Kayvon Thibodeau, who is a very key, important player. They lost Travis Dye, and you brought in a questionable quarterback to lead your roster. I think I wait. Let's see if I can pull up this exact quarterback. I need a producer, somebody who's in my ear who can actually look these things up for me. Ty Thompson. Ty Thompson is the former 5-star recruit. And I watched his film, and I got to say that Ty Thompson is so Dante Moore is still a recruit, and he's heading to Oregon. He committed there. Dante Moore is also very, very talented, and that was a huge get for that Oregon program. So Ty Thompson, start him now. Dante Moore comes in as a freshman next year. Ty Thompson starts next year, which even if you start Bo Nix the entirety of the season, that's going to happen inevitably. He gets 2 years as a starter. He moves on. Dante Moore comes in, and that's the direction of the program. The future is bright. Bo Nix has nothing to do with the future of this program. DJ, no worries. I mean, there's a lot of names to keep track of, a lot of 5-star guys, but Oregon has the potential to possibly be really good. It's going to take them some time. So for those who might remember, I came on the preview show and I made a statement, very definitive statement, that Cincinnati was going to get their asses kicked by Arkansas. And I clipped that and I posted it. And, I got a lot of support from Arkansas fans. And one of the funniest things that I saw in the comments of that video, Cincinnati fans were pissed. And some people even came back after the fact to go, those same people that were pissed, to comment about, my ineptitude as somebody making that determination. I even had some people say that I was biased and I was a homer. I'm from New Jersey and I am a Notre Dame fan. I am not an SEC football fan. So there's no bias for me picking Arkansas to dominate in that game. Albeit it was only a 1-score football game, Arkansas still should have killed them. Anyone who watched that game should agree with me that Arkansas shot themselves in the foot often, offensively and defensively. There were a lot of mishaps, and Cincinnati had a lot of turnovers because they were really out of sync. They were really unprepared, it felt like, in that game. And maybe they didn't have all those penalties. It would have been a different scenario for Cincinnati, but I push back and I say if Arkansas wasn't making the mistakes that they were making, it looked like they came into that game with, I'm not biased, Colin, don't do me like that. It felt like they came into that game thinking that they were going to smack them. And then once they realized it was going to be a little bit more competitive than that, it took them a few quarters to actually flip the switch and close out the game. As somebody who's watched plenty of games like that and even played in games like that where teams show up with the intent to dominate you and thinking it is not going to take them any effort, but you actually show up to fight, it is very tricky for those teams. I'm trying to think of a better way to phrase this. They're still clearly more talented, and they felt like at times they were doing the bare minimum to score on drives. I think that Arkansas team is going to be successful and that they're going to be good, but they were not giving 100% in this game. Cincinnati fans don't want to hear that, but it felt like we're not giving 100% in this game. Last thing I want to talk about, anyone who wants to drop any comments in the chat, any thoughts on this weekend, feel free to. Would happy to answer any questions or just, react to anything that anyone's talking about. NC State versus East Carolina. I feel like this weekend has been the weekend of exposing the frauds. I opened with exposing those who spoke against Notre Dame and spoke so highly about Ohio State, and, exposing those who, including myself, who were doubting Florida. The frauds that thought that Oregon and Bo Nix were going to be competitive against Georgia. And I think NC State is the biggest fraud of the weekend. East Carolina is not 1 point less better than NC State. They are not a ranked team. East Carolina is fine, and they fought really freaking hard. But NC State is not a ranked team. They are not the team that everyone thought that they were. And I will admit, because of the hype around Devin Leary, I was willing to buy into the NC State hype. I almost bet on that game, and I almost bet on NC State to cover. And I think the line was pretty outrageous. But that is a very firm determination. That game alone, that NC State is not as good as we thought that they were. East Carolina could have won that game if it wasn't for kicker mishaps. But I just, to round out that point, Devin Leary is all they have. The rest of that roster is average to mediocre ACC play. It's like a Boston College type team front to back on that roster. Outside of Devin Leary, they are not a ranked program. DJ, we got a comment from you here. Notre Dame looked really good, like you said. If they can get better quarterback play, they will be dangerous. Hopefully Buckner grows throughout the year. So DJ, I almost, and I kind of said this earlier, but I didn't go into full depth. I almost feel like Buckner, he wasn't the issue. I really thought that he played better than a lot of people anticipated. The one thing that when you were hearing the expert picks for this game, everyone was saying, oh, they're starting this Buckner kid, and we don't know anything about him, and he's facing off against CJ Stroud. They're not going to be able to keep up with Ohio State's offense. That was what the big comment was. No one had faith in Buckner. And based on how low the expectations were for him, I thought that the way that he played, the throws that he made were strong. They were good. Statistically, he didn't have like a world beater type day. He did not have over 250 yards even. He was like 177, and I'm curious to pull up what his exact completion percentage was. He finished 10 for 18 for 177, 9.8 yards per attempt. So like that's a decent day for a guy making his first career start in the shoe at Ohio State. And I want to look at the film. I want to go back and watch the film, but you see a lot of the throws that he was making wasn't forcing things. I thought that he less often than CJ Stroud wasn't forcing passes into scenarios where it could lead to a turnover. I thought the decision-making was there. The aspect of his reaction and his evaluation and his awareness that needs to improve is his over-willingness to run. And we saw a lot of that last year in his freshman season. He was brought in to run. They brought him in as a rushing quarterback to spell Jack Cohn because Jack Cohn is a statue. But Buckner, who is a fantastic athlete and is used to doing that, as a lot of these guys are, they're used to doing that at the high school level. They will always, when things break down, instead of moving and evaluating, it's immediately, I need to run. I need to go. I just need to get yardage. And if you're playing a decent defense that is set up for good contain and is preparing for a scrambling quarterback, as the game progresses, you're going to lose out of those opportunities immediately, and they're going to be daring you to throw. They need to open up the offense more. Buckner needs to stop trying to scramble, and I think that they can have success. But the only way that team is going to get better is if they recruit better receiver. They need to get some better receivers because right now that group is not going to get it done. Good running backs, good tight ends. Michael Mayer is fantastic. Tyree and Estime are fantastic, but they got bottled up because everyone knew those were the only options because those receivers for Notre Dame are just not going to get the job done. Another comment here from DJ. Ohio State was really putting the pressure on him. Yeah, they really were. And I also got to give some credit to the Notre Dame offensive line handling that pressure well. They were really coming at him. And I even made a comment when I was at the bar watching this game is that they had gotten to a point where they were just throwing everything. They were, throwing anything and everything at him because there was an anticipation of trying to prevent him from running and trying to fluster him so that he would try to scramble instead of having time to evaluate what was in front of him. DJ's other comment here, NC State definitely overrated. East Carolina's kicker killed them. Yeah, we really saw the impacts of not having a good kicker and what that means. I don't know what year that East Carolina kicker is. I'm willing to bet that he is a freshman, but I've been in those scenarios before. My freshman year at the University of Rhode Island, where I played, we played Central Michigan. We went to triple overtime, and our starting kicker was a freshman. He missed an extra point and multiple game-winning, game-tying field goals that could have won us the game, but the game continued to progress. It is really disheartening for that stuff to happen. And also, just like, again, final thought on this, and I kind of already closed out my points on this game. East Carolina is going to be like a fine American team, American Conference team, and they'll probably be one of the better teams after the way they played. But like, we need to move on from thinking that NC State is any good. I think it's a good note to wrap us up on, because I don't think we're getting any other comments that are filing in. Folks, thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate everyone that hopped in to get ready for the game that is about to kick off. I am going to be tuning into Florida State LSU, which is going to be a fantastic game. I'll probably do some type of reaction after that one is played. But be sure, bye, Colin. I'll miss you. Be sure to hit subscribe, hit that like button if you're on your way out. We'll be back with more, and we'll be continuing to do our reaction streams not every single, as often as we can throughout the season. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, folks. Enjoy the rest of your Labor Day.